HiSec Buyback offers 90% JITA anywhere in HiSec. Simply go to hisec.evebuyback.com, appraise your items, create a contract, and get paid quickly.
Hello, welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I am Arsia, and I'm apparently the host today, and I'm here joined with the crew, Richman.
Hello.
Nick Bison.
Happy Sunday, everybody.
Xiao Shen.
Hello.
And our guest today, Luke Anninan.
Hello, everyone.
Luke is from Fraternity, and we'll be talking about them later in the show. For the week in review, on Tuesday we talked about teaching new players because the new pilots are the lifeblood of the game. On Wednesday we talked about quantum cores, and on Thursday we talked about dread bomb and dock workers springing a trap on Nullsec Pen and killing a lot of capital ships. And here we are today. For the first topic, we have the POS Planner. The IGB POS Planner is back online. It is a tool to help players plan out their player-owned starbases. Does anybody want to talk about what POSs are?
I've had a little bit of experience with them, run quite a few of them, including back when you used to have to get standings up to X amount in order to plant them in HiSec. And then, of course, you had the folks would endlessly run missions so that they could get the loyalty points for the, I just forgot the title of them. But it was, in addition to the POS fuel, if it was in Galente space, you'd need a Galente, not a tag, to go with it. But basically, they were the forerunners to a lot of the structures we have today, where you could do your mining, refining their research of blueprints and building of all types of ships. They're also obviously used for a lot of defensive measures. There was a couple of different styles people brought up, most notably the Death Stars, and of course bad word stars, to basically irritate people. And they were very good at it, and they could be placed just about on any moon that didn't already have one.
So to go into detail about what the Death Stars and the Dick Stars are, which is what they call the other ones, POSs aren't like Citadels. You don't have to gun them. They shoot by themselves at targets that land on grid. So a Death Star is a POS that has a lot of weaponry. And the other kind of named POS is one that has a lot of ECM and EWAR, because they're frustrating to deal with, which is why they're called what they're called.
Yeah, and Rizzo in chat reminded me it's charters. They were the Starbase charters, of which I still have about 10,000 laying around. But the POS guns had to be manned in order to be used. So one of your characters or multiple could roll up to the POS stick and right-click on it, control gun. Uncontrolled guns, they could go ahead and take control of and target individually. The ECM and the other part of the Dick Star was throwing tons of the shield modules on. So it just make the resistances go crazy high. And can it still be killed? Absolutely, but you're going to be there a while.
I've done some reading on POSs because I found out it's a very old feature in the game, something that they struggle to deal with, and it's very buggy, almost impossible to remove because of how the code is integrated and the spaghetti code. And not to mention, the very first kill I ever got on an EVE was a Dread Guristas control tower. I was lured into a 2-hour bash. but it's a long-lost art to be able to set these up. They're still used in wormholes as a beachhead, as I guess an alternative to putting down an Astra house. Sometimes it's a little bit better in cases of using it as a beachhead, but for the majority of people in Eve who've played after Citadels were released, these posses, these sticks are long forgotten. A lot of people don't know how to properly set them up. A lot of people don't know how to properly set up the guns even, and it's just an old art that a lot of the older players still remember and still appreciate. And apparently they were even integrated with the SOV system before even Dominion existed.
One of the other things about that you kind of alluded to was the setup as a beachhead, especially in that are still used a lot in the wormholes. Speed at which you could set it up and start defending it. You're on a large pos, you can get that well under an hour. I think the anchoring time, and I'm probably way off on this, might have been tops 45 minutes, and then fuel it, and bang, she pops up.
Yeah. There are several notable differences between posses and citadels. For one, with posses, you don't set when the reinforcement timer is. Its reinforcement timer is some amount of time in the future dictated by how much strontium you put in the pos. And something people used to have to do is show up when their pos was getting shot and adjust the amount of strontium to try to get a favorable timer. Because if it was shot and you weren't able to get to it, depending on when they shot it, the attackers could get a favorable timer to themselves. So there were a lot of games being played with how much strontium is in there, and when do they expect it to be attacked, and can they show up and change the amount of strontium in the pos while it's being attacked to get a favorable timer. Citadel's completely different. You just set a window in which the timer is favorable to you. So Citadels always have the defensive timer advantage. Wasn't true with posses. Additionally, they don't have a damage cap. They just have a ton of life. So you can theoretically get more ships to infinity and increase the speed. But if you don't have a lot, it takes quite a long time in comparison to a Citadel.
And as to that Stront timer, if I'm not mistaken, maxed out on a large was about 17 hours. And yes, I actually knew some folks that both in Null and in HiSec, the two main areas I played around in with them, they would adjust their Stront daily based off when they knew we'd have the most people on. So that was a little bit much for me. So, but there's another way of doing it.
And speaking of the old magic of pauses, there used to be a tactic to counter people, particularly your hostiles, from changing the Stronts in their timer. And the way you could do that is you can't add or remove strontium from a pause's strontium bay if the shield is below a certain percentage. Memory serves, it's 50%. So the tactic would be you'd get your bashing fleet on the pause, get the shield below 50%, and then hold grid for hours. For however long you thought it would be, until you could sit there and finish off the Rio and have the timer come out not when the defenders were expecting. It was particularly effective and funny if you did so when the hostiles have a Strunt refueler in the pause itself, watching you the whole time.
But alas, these posses are old, they're buggy, they became troublesome to manage and deal with and everything else. So out with the old, in with the new, and now we have Citadels.
A nightmare. Yeah, and good point on that, because Rich, that they were, I wouldn't say they were buggy, probably because I played with them so much that I got used to the idiosyncrasies with them. But yeah, good point. They're, but there was no access lists. It was a password that if someone changed it, you could get ejected or bounce.
People use that on purpose too, as a way to starburst out of it to escape in different directions, and it's actually a really cool feature. And the fact that it is a password means that, unlike an access list, that people can enemies can get the password, and they can go in and eject the ships out of your hangar arrays and such, and steal the ships in the pause, in a way that's just not available in Citadels. They have a certain amount of Eve charm from an old player's perspective.
I'll just mention two things, I guess. One thing is that pauses were used very commonly in the last constellation of Imperium when the war was on. So inside one DQ, every moon has a pause in it, and then every pause was gunned and has EWAR modules on it. So you have to warp either to a safe or warp clocally to one of the moons. Otherwise, you get shot. So that's one thing. And the second thing is pauses are still being used nowadays in Nullsec for ratting. One thing is that, let's say if you're in a system that you intend to rat and there's not a structure in it that you can go either tether or it's too expensive to put on a structure and to core it, you will use a pause with a large enough area to protect either your capital or super capital for them to have a docking place or have a place to protect yourself when neutrals roaming around in your area.
They're also used by small groups that have a Titan and want to bridge off of it and keep the Titan safe.
Yeah, and it's way cheaper to put a pause down compared to put a Keepstar down for, let's say, a super docking or super tethering for an Astra House or Fortizar.
Yeah, very much so.
I think the revival of this tool is excellent, especially in the new Citadel era with the cores. I'm guessing the pause is cheaper than a Citadel and a core and the fittings, right?
Much cheaper, yeah.
It is much cheaper.
Pauses are very cheap.
But there are problems, right? There are problems with bouncing around. Like, I mean, it is kind of reliable since structure are getting more and more expensive, like CCP intended. But pauses can be a solution to expensive citadels. But there are pros and cons in both sides.
I think the last thing I'll mention about pauses is that good point that, yeah, a lot less expensive. But the last thing I'll say is you got to remember, has to be on a moon. So that limits, where they can go and how many.
Yeah. So this tool coming back online is fantastic because, as we covered, there's still a lot of uses for pauses. And we've been expecting them to go away for a long time, and pauses are just here with us for the foreseeable future. So it's good to know or have a tool that helps you plan them out if you're going to put one down. The next order of business is the EVE Academy video on wormhole basics. It looks like Ashi of Outfoxed was working with CCP to bring us an update to the EVE Academy on wormhole mechanics. Anybody have anything to say about this video?
I haven't had a chance to see it yet.
I'm afraid nothing off the top of my head. Ashi is a fantastic wormhole. I got to meet her yesterday, along with the partner, husband, Teddy. And I'm glad to see that there's more outreach to, newer players and wormholes. To me, I think wormhole space has traditionally been quite scary for newer players. The idea that you could, sometimes it could be one way, if you get attacked, help isn't coming, and the fact that you might not be able to access it ever again.
But was that not part of the fun of the wormholes? So, you have the basic videos, that's great to bring people into it, but I remember when I first started out from an exploration perspective, it was kind of almost fun not knowing that much about it, because it created that sense of risk that EVE was always meant to be about.
But you don't really get born to wormhole space, you get born into a known space. So you really have to set aside your old expectations when you go in.
For sure. Wormhole mechanics are in a lot of ways different than the rest of the areas in the game, to the point where sometimes updates don't take them into consideration and cause a lot of outrage among the wormhole players. I think they're a fantastic area of the game that is really good to teach people about.
Just for this video, if you're an old player, experienced player watching this video, you will find a lot of them. A lot of information that they say is kind of limited. But if you're a new player watching this video, it's great. You can learn a lot from Wormhole. It is a lot of information, so maybe it's a good idea to watch bit by bit and then try to explore and do it yourself instead of just watching the video.
And wormholes are a fantastic tool, even for those who don't live in wormholes. I use them as quick travel all the time, especially Thera, but in general.
I mean, let's be clear though, Baleful. Arsia. Thera isn't a wormhole.
That's fair, because you can set your clone there. But I use regular wormholes too for travel. Carry a depot and probes with you when you're out in the black, and you can get home pretty quickly, almost no matter where you are. In other news, Keepstar losses in Delve as the Imperium continues the great Reconquista after PAPI withdraws. I believe there's up to 101 Keepstars destroyed since they were introduced, with a slew of additional Keepstar losses by PAPI Keepstars exploding this week. Does anybody have anything to say about that?
We are at 102 Keepstars according to Zkill, and with that, I'm a little sad to say nobody has beaten the Keepstar death record, which is 4 Keepstars in. Let me double check.
It was in a 20.
Minutes, was it?
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Keepstar. The Keepstar kill record is 4 Keepstars in 55 minutes, and nobody's beaten that since 2018. So I want to see this record beaten. I want to see 4 Keepstars dead in 55 minutes or less, or at least 5 Keepstars in 1 hour. If people are looking at feeling ambitious.
Was there a count? Did we have a decent count on how many PAPI Keepstars in the Delve area?
I think
judging by the blank stares, I'm going to say no.
I think it was like 8 or 9 destroyed this week.
Well, the week started on the 8th, and we are looking at...
From the 8th to the 15th, 10 were destroyed. Are there any still up?
I do not know. I didn't have any good info on that.
Shen, Luke, you guys are Nullsec warlords of some kind. Do you know?
I mean, anything? I don't know the exact number. I know, obviously, there were 5 on the kind of direct chain out of Delve, and I know there was probably half a dozen or so dotted around elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a test Keepstar chain, I think most of them on there is already destroyed. But for other things, it's kind of OPSEC in some way. But you can look at them, but it didn't have paid enough attention to just go around and mark every single one down.
Kind of disappointed by the Imperium propaganda machine. I think PAPI was definitely better in terms of their doomsday clock web pages and, like, you know, this is how many we're gonna kill and everything. Now it's sort of, I mean, who knows?
But here's the thing. That is hubris. That is pride. And now somebody can look at
I
those websites
enjoy
and
it.
say,
it is wonderful.
Because somebody can now look at these websites and say, boy, that aged like milk.
Well, you know, there's a lot of the whole, and I'm just going to refer to it as phase 1 of the war, because I think phase 2 is going to be coming before we know it, probably in a month or less. There was a lot of that in the first half of this war. God, I'm almost going to hate myself for bringing this up or saying it. The Imperium survival, you know, they did what they needed to do. And everybody knows I'm not an Imperium fan. A lot of folks were complaining about them they're using the game mechanic of, you know, you can't get that many people into a system. For former military folk, they were using the terrain to their advantage, and they did it damn well. They joked about people didn't understand floodplains. Floodplains were trading space for time. And then once they got backed in, they were using that terrain to the best of their advantage. Was that all part of their plan from day one? Have no idea. I wouldn't listen to the standard folks for truth on that, but I wouldn't mind talking to some of their movers and shakers that actually did the planning to know if that was part of the plan or not.
I mean, right now, in some way, the Imperium is the PAPI coalition is buying time with the amount of structure that they left in Delph. So, I mean, if you listen to the most recent, I think, meta show, I think Matani said they're going to clean up all the Delph structures and all the iHub and stuff like that, and then moving on to chasing, test, and the rest of PAPI. So, in some way, the fact that they left so many structures in Delph is kind of helping them right now in terms of evacuation.
Here, I think that strategy is wrong because if they're evacuating, if they're leaving, why not go on the offensive? Why not spearhead directly and leave, how do I say, reserve forces, irregulars, to mop up the Keepstars, especially if there's not going to be much of a resistance?
Because you don't know if there's not going to be a resistance. It appears, by initial outward appearance, it looks like a rout. It looks like run away, you know, the classic Monty Python, scream run away and off we go. But there's some pretty clever people on both sides of this. And if you dash after them headlong with part of your force, you could be walking into something you didn't want to. So that's possibly part of their mindset of, let's clean up our home, have a look at the battlefield, find who our target is, and then we'll go deal with them.
Yeah, I see. I don't want to, well, while you still have this momentum, you don't want to burn it out on some overextension.
Yeah, and they're also probably taking the time to set themselves back up in the region as PAPI rats are expanding back out of the constellation they were in and getting themselves into place before probably going on the offensive. So if nobody has anything else to say, we can move on to Warped Intentions merging into Brave. Anybody have anything about that?
I am not too keen to hear that. After with what happened with the war and the various different members of PAPI, I'm a little sad to see that an entire alliance are merging into Brave, and especially with where Brave is destined to go to next, Geminate.
Well, hey, Rich, who's the Warped Intentions folks? Because I'm not terribly familiar with them.
To my knowledge, they were legacy vassals that they lived more close. They were called Legacy Voltron because it was Brave. Warped Intentions, I think, at the time Evictus was also part of them. There was already replaced these smaller, more independent alliances who lived in places like Fithablis, Tenerifis, Impasse, and I call them vassals because they don't hold rent. They don't pay rent, not to my knowledge at least. They obviously pledge their loyalty and they try to hold the space and will pledge their members to fleets, especially on a coalition level. However, they don't pay rent, so I call them vassals.
So perhaps
So they're like
members?
Belgium. They're like Belgium is to NATO. Sorry, couldn't resist.
So technically, they're called Voltron. So in early war, when the numbers were up, Legacy can bring 2 full fleets. One fleet from Test, and the fleet is from Voltron fleet. So Voltron refers to everyone in Legacy except for Test.
I would compare it to more like let's see. How about the Abbasids and the Mamluks? The Mamluks in Egypt they controlled Egypt, but they swore fealty to their to the Caliph at the time. So that would be the equivalent. They didn't pay rent, but they could be called into war, and if they didn't like what was being offered or their services, they could technically rebel and seek independence. But yeah, they essentially swear fealty and pledge loyalty and provide a number of troops or fleets or such to a bigger coalition, bigger alliance members at hand.
Basically, a semi-independent type group that would help out.
Yeah, essentially. It's like Wales in the Middle Ages. Once they were conquered, of course.
That's a fiefdom. Yeah.
Anyway, to move on, the question has recently come up about allowing deployables in starter systems. We have a small high-sec group called the NewEden Police Force, who spent some time cleaning up all like the mobile depots and anchorables in starter systems. These things are oftentimes used for ads. And the argument against these things is that they clutter up the environment and the overview for new players who are just starting, who have that terrible starting overview and are trying to get accustomed to the game. And what is everybody's opinion on the idea of deployables in starter systems?
I mean, I'm personally all for removing them. I think one of the things that as a new player in Eve is this vast universe, and no one wants to jump in, and all of a sudden there's 150 adverts for various different corps. It's kind of something very similar that happens in other MMOs, and I just think starter systems should be a place for somebody to explore the game, not be advertised to.
I'm definitely of two minds about it. 90% of me is absolutely with you on that, Luke, because that starting overview is frightening when you undock and there's like 9 million of these freaking things anchored out there all telling you, come here. But on the other half of that is what the NewEden Police Force, not only did they go around killing those, a lot of those, ton of them, they also had newer players they'd bring with them, which also helped teach them about the crime mechanic. You're going to get a criminal flag. If these kind of people show up, you need to hide for X amount. So they were also providing instructions to newer players at the same time, which is valuable. But yeah, you're right. It's a starter system.
I mean, if the advertising was kind of like the system adjacent, then I think you kind of get the best of both worlds, where the NewEden Police Force can kind of train people how to deal with them and how all those mechanics work. But at the same time, you're right, you just don't end up with this massively cluttered overview when you log in and you go, well, what is this? I don't get it.
For correction's sake, it's a suspect mechanic when you shoot a deployable. A criminal mechanic is when Concord kills you. Suspect is when people can engage you.
Yeah, and I'll probably play the other side of this. So as a part of Nullblock, as a corporation in Nullsec, those things are the things that we put up in HighSec. I can say some of that I put it up in HighSec. That the whole point of that is just literally to bring people to Nullsec. I mean, it is bad in the sense that it kind of blocks the view, but we kind of need something to advertise and to bring out the advertisements to those new players. I think if CCP can bring or can create a new way of corporation advertising themselves in those new beginner systems, then that would be great. But as of right now, that's like one of the few ways we can get them. I mean, we are not Fraternity who send out like if mails to every new bro that enters the game in the first day in rookie help. So that's just part of our way to do it.
Well, that's a serious accusation. Unfortunately, I myself have gotten one of those mails from my Gita alts.
Yeah, I think you're always going to have new bro focused corps that are going to do that sort of spam, and I think an Eve mail is it's an Eve mail. It's probably more of the place for that sort of advertisement. People are familiar with it with real life emails and everything else. I think having a deployable in space feels a little bit jarring to me, but that's just my personal opinion.
I feel like they're the same. Deployable and Eve mail is the same thing. It's just advertisements.
Do you guys think...
I like the Eve mail. Sorry, Arsia. Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you guys think that part of the problem could be corrected by starting players with a better overview?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. With certain of those features or items turned off. Yeah, without a doubt. But to Shen's point about, recruiting for null groups, getting them new players, My personal opinion, and there's a lot of give and take on this. Hey, leave the new bros alone. You need F1 monkeys. Let them play for a couple months first and figure out what they like to do. They'll end up in null sooner or later, but you don't need to bombard them on day one.
Oh man, I feel like I hard disagree on this with all of you. I quite like the idea of spamming advertisements, spamming mails, having local chatter going crazy, having the mobile depots everywhere, because it gives you that vibe as a new player that you just stumbled drunkenly into a back alley in some dystopian sci-fi future. You don't know a thing that's going on, but you know everyone is out there to get you and exploit you. And I think that is just wonderful. I mean, yeah, it sucks if somebody actually exploits new players, and I agree on the overview point. But I think it would be a very different place, and the new players would get a very different vibe if they didn't show up and get immediately blasted by people trying to scam them.
So kind of following up your kind of dystopian future sort of thing, do you think if it was something like billboards, for example, I think that would really add that flavor to it, whereas I think depots are a nuisance. I think you're right. I think it's an interesting way of bringing people in. I'm just not sure. Maybe the depot thing is the issue that I have.
I think depots themselves are pretty fun, especially they're used a lot in RP to represent things like satellites and such, and other things because you can anchor it and you can name it whatever you want to name it. And obviously, they're also used for ads. The problem for a new player is they might not understand their overview. I think the main problem is with the overview, and I think the overview itself could fix it, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion if they started with a better overview.
In chat, Sid brought up something that had never occurred to me. I didn't even know if it's technically possible, but instead of billboards for alliances and corporations putting millions of these up, what about a recruiting station?
Well, I think
part of the point of putting those things up is to force new players to have to look at it, but it comes up to your overview right away once you're docked up or once you get off the tutorial. So, I mean, that's the whole point, right? If a player has a choice,
go ahead. I'm
do
sorry,
that,
Shen.
if a player has a choice to do that, they tend not to. But if they don't have a choice to look at it or not, then they have to look at it. So that's the whole point of advertising.
If you're warping to a gate and there's 20 mobile depots anchored there, I don't know anybody yet, and I could be completely wrong, that's going to sit there and go, wow, I think I'll cycle through and read all these.
Though I do think the solution of just killing them is a very Eve solution, and I approve. If you don't like the depot, you can kill a depot. The thing about depots is they reinforce, so you have to come back in 2 days.
Well, it's honestly like a bunch of press gangs of, I don't know, World War I, World War II era. They gather up a bunch of lost new bros and Shanghai them into F1 service in the Cormorant fleet in some godforsaken system.
That's Artimus waiting in that alley for him.
Come over here, there's candy.
Anything else on this topic before we move on? All right. So next we're going to go into fraternity fights. Luke, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and then about fraternity going back north and getting the money from your reserve banks?
Yeah, sure. So for those of people that don't know me, I don't think I've ever been on TS before. I'm Luke Anninan. I'm the military director of Winter Coalition and an exec of Fraternity. I've been playing EVE this time around for about 3 years, just over 3 years, and before that kind of came to the game, then got bored and wandered off and did other things and kind of came back. And this time I've managed to stick. But yeah, in terms of I'll start on the ESS thing because the ESS thing is the interesting conversation at the moment. At the moment, we announced we were going to allow our guys to take money out of the ESS, and they defended it. It's their ratting, it's their income. They should go and get it. Whereas at the moment, to be honest, the contract price for the keys is around about, or if not more, than what you can actually pull out of the ESS especially on the 15-minute keys. So we've actually just not bothered pulling the money out. We'll have a fight when somebody's there, and we'll take what they've what they've got. But until the prices kind of come down, it's not really worth pulling the money out.
Well, why? Okay, tell me, why are these keys so damn expensive? I know it's a real pain in the ass to get them, and you can't sell them on the market, so we can't pull a market price. We have to go based on contract prices, which up, down, left, right, sideways.
Well, they do have a market price though, nominally, don't they? Because you know what you're going to get out of the ESS in a 15-minute period, so it's kind of already got a set price in terms of their ultimate value.
Fair, but okay, if with the 15-minute keys they pull $1 billion, why are they? Who the hell's paying more than $1 billion for a key? They're going to make a loss.
So I think it's 1.16, I think, and at the moment I saw a couple going for 1.2, which seems a bit extreme, but most of them tend to be around 1 bill, 1.1 bill.
So why do you think people are paying $1 billion to get $1 billion? Is it just for the fights?
Well, I think it's good content, right? You can go in, you can set up, you can run the key. You're going to get hopefully you're going to get a bill out of it, so you can SRP anything you lose if you manage to get away, and then set up and have a fight.
But you're paying $1 billion for not a guaranteed billion, because maybe stuff comes and pushes you out. Couldn't just, I know it pings the whole region if you go to the reserve bank, but you can go to steal one of the regular banks for free and not pay $1 billion, and then get whatever you get on top of that, right? And maybe get a fight.
I'd be interested to see if the contracts are actually selling at $1 billion, or if it's just that there's so little supply, people can put up contracts for $1 billion and there's no one to undercut them.
I mean, part of that is basically you're using ISK to buy content, right? It's more like similar to structure timers, right? You're putting up a structure, you're putting them in danger, and then when the reinforcement timer comes out, you're putting the structure on the line, but that is going to be some content for you if you choose.
Yeah, on the subject of content, we brought it up when the Grand Heist was first announced, that this would be great NPSI content, not purple shoot. So fleets which are open to all members of any allegiance, you just join fleet and go and do your thing. And Spectre Fleet has released a fantastic video of their exploits in stealing ISK from the large Nullsec empires.
And I think for those big NPSI fleets, it works really well, right? Because you can farm 5 or 6 keys during the day as a bit of a prep, and then take your fleet out and roam through these different ESSs.
I do think it kind of makes sense to have the price pretty high. Otherwise, getting your own money out would be far too easy, and far too worthwhile of your time, and therefore not really be an option for other people to come take your money if it was too easy to get it out yourself, or too lucrative.
Oh, I agree. I mean, if they were too cheap, then everything would just get emptied and there'd be a useless mechanic at that point.
Well, I remember I translated Noros's statement about the ESS keys along with other things. How has Frat handled the ESS keys being released, and have you managed to obtain any of the ISK that you left behind in your former space that you still somewhat control in like Oasa and the other drone lands?
Yeah, so where we've acquired keys normally by running the sites, we've gone and pulled ISK out. We've not done it on like this full scale mass kind of locust fleet that I think everyone was expecting, but we've certainly pulled the ISK out when we've had the opportunity. But at the same time, the ability to run the sites and the cost of the keys has made us revisit and just look at it and go, well, if we get the opportunity, we'll do it. If not, we'll have a fight on an ESS. It's all content and fun.
And if somebody else opens the bank and you kill them, you can sit there because it's still open for however many minutes and get the money, right?
Yeah, you can link to the bank and then start drawing down from their hard work. So,
yeah. Anything else on the ESS before you want to move on to the Snuff fight?
I would say on the ESS side, there are fleets that, at least I've seen, that it's basically unsolvable as their doctrine. So what they do, I've seen this a couple of times. So they warp in 5 to 6 paladins or marauders that can shoot at very long range in, and then AB burn them like 100, 200 kilometer off the ESS, and they have a phantasm or something else try to steal the key. So if you form up, if they see them, if they see you using the acceleration gate, their phantasm is going to burn off, and then what's going to be waiting for you is 5 paladins or more with its ultra range and ultra DPS, and you get bopped. There's no other way to defend it. So, I mean, it is a lot of risk to put that much Marauders on the line, but it is basically unsolvable as of right now. Because those paladins can micro jump drive out and align out, do whatever they want.
Well, I think it's the reverse of the defense meta, right? A lot of the null blocks when ESSs came out started exploring the use of Marauders because, inside the ESS they're pretty hard to kill and they're pretty hard to deal with if you're just in a small gang. I think the only way to deal with that really is wait until they've got all the ISK out and try and catch them.
Yeah, I mean, the only way to deal with that, to be honest, is more Marauders. So if they warp in 5, we have to warp in 10, and then it's DPS. We have to be able to shoot at the same amount, around the same range, and we will have to have more DPS than them. And there's no other way, to be honest, because inside the ESS, Marauder is the most powerful ship you can bring.
It's actually quite scary to field against Marauders, because even if you bring 10 Marauders in, here's the problem. If you don't all slide in at the same time, if you don't all hold vulnerability at the same time, if one of you enters early or breaks invulnerability early, they die. Because the enemy have all this time to prepare, and you're trying to slide in against them. So, yeah, I think the ESS grid with the current Marauder mechanics, it's not ideal.
Yeah, Marauders are really hard to deal with.
Yeah, inside ESS, if one side can feel the Marauders, fight is basically over.
I want to know about Frat moving back north. Luke, I think we started that, but back in Vale, is that accurate?
Yeah, Vale is our home. So we will move back into Vale and continue our kind of industry and our, well, I say rebuilding. I mean, recovering and rebuilding is probably not the right word.
Yeah, you said move back in. So that's a work in progress, I take it, at this time, other than obviously the folks that had remained there to hold the fort.
So I think we're mostly moved back in now. Obviously, everyone's kind of aware that people have been running up and down the Keepstar chain, moving everything back in. I think as of today, most of our guys are now back in Vale, so we're at full capacity. It's been a very, very long week of move ups.
Oh, I can imagine. It's also pretty hefty sized group to shuffle back and forth. Any lessons learned on the move other than, and I'm not talking about the meme guy jumping to the wrong Sino or crazy things like that happen every time. But any good logistical lessons learned you've run into?
Yeah, so I think there's probably 2. One is don't underestimate the need to have fuel. I mean, we spent a lot of time, and we had caches that we'd kind of moved in position, knowing that if an evac was going to happen, that the market was going to get flooded with very expensive topes. So I think that's the big one, and then the second bit is, always assume if you think you've jumped every carrier, there's at least a dozen that didn't turn up for a move up. So it's really about trying to have as much around the clock coverage as possible to get those guys up the chain.
Now, on your group, I was just kind of curious because I've run into this in the past. The different isotopes, was the majority of your fleets common type, or were you like need all 4?
I think we needed all 4 because people, even stuff that people don't normally bring, they'll bring for this sort of war. I think the interesting taupe was oxygen, because obviously that comes out of drone space, and there's not a huge amount working in drone space with obviously Horde South and limited kind of frat in Oasa, with the fact that most of our stuff is in Vale. I think oxygen was the big one. So you kind of have to just look at what the market's currently got before you're going to move, and then try and work out what that's going to look like once everyone starts panic buying.
It's the thing with oxygen isotopes. I mean, part of that is its production is kind of low because it's in Galente space, so that means it's like fade and the rings and stuff like that. But another part is oracles use them. So 4 empire each have their own capitals and super capitals, but oracle as them from ore, and ore is kind of from Galente, so they use the Galente isotopes, which is the oxygen ones, which means that the consumption of those isotopes is much higher compared to the others.
Now, it's not a sales pitch or anything, but I happen to be sitting on a few million round or
Sounds
small
like a sales
stash.
pitch.
I think
Dang it.
offloading them a week ago would have been the prime time to offload them.
Yeah, and also another thing is if you look at those capitals, Nynx is one of the most popular supercarriers to be in because it has really great ability to rat and it is also armor tanked, which is kind of the favor of super capital fleets nowadays, or back in the days. It depends on how you look at it. So that also creates a lot more demand for oxygen isotopes.
Yeah, I
You
was
have nothing
curious.
else?
I was curious what you ran into with that because I always ran short of oxy. When I was trying to move stuff.
I mean, we were okay. I mean, we kind of we have caches of fuel, which is just good practice, I think. And obviously when the evac was announced, we slowly started to move it down and making sure that it was sold to members directly that needed it, rather than putting on a market where it could just get bought up and relisted for, I think last time I saw it was like 5,000k per tope.
Yeah, so just to give people an idea of where isotope is, so the helium, nitrogen, and the hydrogen ones, they used to go about like 1,200 or to 1,300-ish. The oxygen one used to be about 1,700-ish, and now their price has gone up to what is it right now, which is to some degree doubled it, but yeah.
I think the other lesson is always jump from your watch list. I know that's a bit harder with the beacon deployable beacons now.
I mean, are we going to talk about the beacon provides, or
Did Fraternity
What's that?
lose quite a bit to the bait beacons? Because the beacons do indeed provide. There's been a number of bait beacons that have gotten some pretty nice kills while everybody's been moving.
I'll
Has
need to pull up the battle report. I don't think we lost. I think we lost a couple of capitals. No supers, no titans. Thank God. I think there were some capitals that probably jumped to it by mistake, though.
But
There's
are you guys
definitely-
moving the same route as the rest of PAPI or test? Because I think you guys moving through up, so in the north part, or do you guys also move through catch?
No, we've moved some things through that way. There are some other routes, obviously, which I won't go into. But yeah, we have moved up the similar chain.
Yeah, so the Providence bait beacon is probably very deadly, I guess, to a lot of people.
I've seen some crazy kills on that thing, actually. It's pretty funny.
I'm just curious because I haven't used one of these new deployable beacons. Can you name them also?
The
You can, I think. No, I think it just shows the pilot name that lit the beacon.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
fair enough. Because I was just sitting there going, free cookies and milk, jump here, just something.
I think the interesting thing is it drives you to click on the capacitor, right? Because if one person has dropped 5 beacons, you have to go to right-click capacitor jump to choose a beacon.
Yeah. For beacons, you have to use that way, but for normal Sino, you can use the watch list one.
So I think it increases the risk of people hitting the wrong beacon. But again, I think that, to be honest, I think that's actually kind of good for the game. I think Eve's always been a game where you've got to pay attention, otherwise you get punished.
and caps and supers dying is every time a cap or a super dies, an angel gets its wings. So
I mean, the best thing to use, the safest thing to do is having your own Sino out, so you don't Sino to someone else. You don't jump to some other people's Sino, so you don't know who that person is. You have never met that person before, so using your own out for Sinoing is probably the safest way to go.
I think it's even if you don't have your own ult though to light a Sino, it's always good just to have eyes on the grid that you're going to jump to, so you can verify where the Sino is. We all know stories where people have flipped their spies at the last minute.
Yeah. I mean,
If there's nothing
always
else
have an
on the
out.
beacon providing, do you want to talk about the fight with Snuff? 930 billion lost between both sides.
Yeah, so I mean, this is an interesting one because I was actually out at the time and had to jump on Discord from my phone in the car and try and listen into what happened. But my understanding, we've got an Asbel in Osase. I can't pronounce that system. Snuff had reinforced it before. It's a bit of a common structure to get shot. They reinforced it last week. They formed a Macarial fleet to try and push its armor time, and we formed up, and they decided to jump off grid. And then this time they reinforced it again. We obviously took a Union fleet to defend it, and yeah, they decided that it was a good opportunity to escalate. So they brought in TFIs. We escalated a little bit, they escalated a bit, and then we ended up jumping Titans and Supers. Just turned into a surprisingly large brawl for what was it Tuesday afternoon? Was it a Wednesday afternoon? But eventually, 11th. So yeah, so we managed to stabilize the situation.
Wednesday.
I think after the third Titan died, and then it was just scrambling to keep everything chained down as long as possible, because everything on that grid at that point, if you can stop it from jumping out, you can kill.
I have a question. Were you surprised with 800 repeating TFI?
I've not seen Snuff use it. It is something we've used with our own TFIs. I don't think we were expecting it, but then it wouldn't be too dissimilar to what they do with their Macarials at times.
They've used them before. They used them against Siege Green and Secede when they were fighting there.
Yeah, so it's not an uncommon refit. As I say, we do the same thing with our TFIs. And Snuff are more used to brawling, so I guess it kind of adds the advantage. If they can just get in close, then obviously they can do a lot of damage very quickly with them.
So inside the fraternity, do you guys view this fight as is positive or is negative? Because on the battle report, it is saying you guys are positive, but in reality, I think Titans are cost way more than what is up in the BR.
I mean, it's an interesting one. I think it's probably largely neutral. Dreads are certainly day to day more strategic. So losing Dreads is going to hurt, and Titans you're obviously only losing a couple, so you've got a bit more time to replace them, and you've got more Titans that you can use. Obviously, one of the benefits of winning the fight and holding the grid is you do get to do the loot and salvage, which would have been, if I remember correctly, it was well over 100 bill of loot and salvage. Which obviously lightens the load a bit, but I think it was probably largely neutral, knowing that Z-kill Titan values are not particularly accurate.
So
plus, obviously, the objective was won, right? So you could argue is the objective win important enough? But obviously, the FCs on the day decided it was.
The structure did not go into hull; it was repaired. You saved the structure, as I said on the stream on Friday, was it? Right?
Thursday.
So the structure did repair, like they didn't push the Asbel into hull.
Correct.
Wonderful.
So what's morale look like coming out of the fight? Are you ready to defend it again when they inevitably come back?
Honestly, I think every person I spoke to loved it. There's been a year of pretty high tie-dye fights, a lot of fights where the odds are stacked in a specific direction, so you're not really getting a brawl, you're kind of going to bash a structure. And from everyone I spoke to, including the people that lost the Titans, they were kind of, I think one of the pilots was immediately, I want another Titan because next time this happens, I want to jump back in again. So I think generally speaking, the morale was pretty good.
For the folks that, like obviously your crew been doing a lot of the null side, and this being in low, difference in tie-dye or the effect or how quickly it accumulated?
Crime Watch will make it a lot worse than if it was a null. Crime Watch is basically the system that flags you suspect or criminal depending on what you do in high and low sec. So if you shoot somebody in low sec, you get a suspect flag. So or if you shoot a pod, you get a criminal flag, but it's essentially the same as long as you remain in low sec. But for every aggression, like the system's like checking this stuff and calculating security status, and everybody's losing security status for shooting people if they're not flashy. So tie-dye accumulates a lot faster. So it must have been really bad.
I mean, as I understand, the tie-dye, I mean, I got on grid just towards the end while tie-dye was still there. It was still pretty bad, but again, most Nullsec pilots have been fighting, you know, down in Delve where it was 99% tie-dye pretty much continuously for like the Keepstar anchor timers, right? So I think most pilots were familiar with it, and there were periods where tie-dye dropped, which I think most people were quite nice. I think the biggest challenge was people understanding LowSec mechanics versus Nullsec mechanics.
Well, I'm hoping they have their security status up by the end of the week, and they resolve their kill rights. God forbid they got any.
I think everyone is scrambling for tags. I don't know what the market for tags is like at the moment, but I suspect it's pretty buoyant.
But when I saw it, I thought, my God, there's another Dreadball brawl going on. This is, especially with scarcity and the new industry changes. I'm surprised to see this. After seeing, I guess, the grinding of the war, this looks like a luxury because it's an actual proper fight. There's some meat and potatoes on the table. It's nutritious.
And I think that's why most people's morale is pretty high at the back of it, because it's actually a chance for a proper fight.
So with the aftermath of this fight, do you think it's going to hurt both sides at all, or it's just a daily thing?
I mean, I think that's a tricky one. I mean, obviously Snuff are a very wealthy alliance. Most of the pilots, especially pilots chucking around Titans and Supers, tend to be pretty wealthy themselves. And obviously we have our own SRP programs and things in place. So I don't think it's going to stop people throwing their assets around, because at the end of the day, that's, you know, you want your asset to die ultimately because that means you've used it. I mean, maybe you don't quite want it to die, but you want the risk of it dying. So, you know.
Now, I'm not sure if you were on the commanding side of it or you are in the commanding channels, but I've spoken about how because you have larger numbers, Snuff tries to compensate by using more expensive ships, more expensive implants, greater individual quality, more pilots multi-boxing, just more. What was it like to fight a low-sec enemy which prided itself more on quality over quantity?
So I was listening to the command channel, unfortunately for the main part of it, because I wasn't at home. I think there's definitely a recognition that the low sec meta in terms of the various pods you use and all the rest of it do make a big difference.
Do you have plans to target these pods in the future? Run a little smart bomber, something like that?
I mean, I think it depends what's going on at the time, right? If you're losing Titans because the number of dreads on grid, you're obviously going to spend the time trying to stabilize that situation rather than worrying about pods, because all pods are going to do is give you a positive kill board. But if you don't clear the DPS, you know, it's going to get pretty difficult.
On that note, are you guys planning on in the future also making you guys a mandatory thing to have high pods in low sec fights?
That's probably something I won't go into on here at the moment.
I do want to ask real quick, like, y'all live in Vale. LowSec is near enough to Vale, but you've got an Asbel in here. Why would somebody choose to build using an Asbel in LowSec versus in Nullsec? I don't understand industry, but to my knowledge, there's like bonuses you get for being in Nullsec versus LowSec. Help me out here. Why is there an Asbel in a LowSec system?
So, I mean, the first thing is I understand it, the Asbel that's in Otsasai is a Corp owned Asbel, and I believe it's the same Corp that owns the Keepstar there. But I guess someone better at industry might be able to explain if there's any benefit for an Asbel. I'm assuming it's kind of out my wheelhouse a little bit.
The difference between low and nullsec is that lowsec gets additional strength to their rigs than a high sec, but nullsec gets even higher strength than lowsec. Like the strength of the rigs on the industry depends on the security status of the system. So LowSec has better benefits than high sec, and nullsec has better benefits than lowsec for producing.
So this isn't like strategically important structures to Fraternity. This was Corp-owned assets that Fraternity just happened to be well positioned to defend and really take a big chunk out of Snuff while doing it.
I mean, obviously we will defend, all of our Corp's assets. And yeah, I don't know if anyone was expecting it to escalate the way it did. But this is Snuff, so kind of always assume an escalation. But we'll always defend Corp-owned assets where we can.
Well, I was just wondering about that because they were talking about, being there in Otsatsi, and that's like next door to Oimo, the high sec. Otsatsi was where I used to jump freighter to because it was that last low before high heading out to Jita. So maybe it wasn't really a production location, but a waypoint for logistics.
It's definitely possible. I guess one thing that someone just PM'd me, I don't know if anyone can answer this. One of the things you can do in LowSec is the one of the Thucker rigs that you can use in LowSec that you can't use in Nullsec.
I don't mess with structures.
I can confirm that it's a thing. As to its efficacy, I am uncertain.
So I know Faction Warfare has bonuses at producing in NPC stations, but as far as that rig goes, I did Faction Warfare for a long time, but I am not an industry player at all, so I really don't know about the Thucker rig.
Let's perhaps talk a bit more about what we're experts on. Spaceships blowing up, shall we? So, Fraternity, you've moved back into Vale of the Silent, setting up your home space, doing a lot of crabbing. That's gotta paint a really big target on your back, not only for the ESS stuff that we've talked about, but also for the general whalers, hunters, even Snuff hitting your low-sec targets. Are you really feeling an increase in the amount of hunting going on now that you're back home, or is it the fleet's home, the military's home, so you're here to defend and the hunting is dying down?
I think there's definitely an increase in hunting. I don't necessarily think it's because we're back home. I actually feel like it's people possibly coming back to the game that were hunters previously, which is good.
To some degree, it's probably because you're going back home as somebody who does hunt. With the other alliances, like the PAPI alliances, returning to their space, it's more lucrative to go to those places now. Whereas before, it was like everybody's in Delve, let's go to Delve, right? So with people spreading back out again, hunters will be more likely to show up to your space too.
I can answer this. Pre-retreat, it was go to Delve for content, or go to Fortac HWWF. Because, but the problem with Delve is you end up running into full-on war fleets, and those aren't fun to deal with. In systems like Fortac HWWF, the Fraternity home system, there's people there. There's fights there. There's people who make mistakes there, and there's just a lot of things to do. Systems like R10 and LXQ at the time, they became depopulated. It just wasn't that great to go to. Same with DP and Esoteria. It's got a good concentration of very active players.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, obviously we moved down from Oasa to Vale, so it was something we knew would happen, and to a degree we wanted to happen because we wanted to get more content and more PvP content rather than more just sitting and ratting and mining.
You're remarkably close to Jita, so I can stage in somewhere like Oimo, or just buy things in Jita and just start gating my way into Fraternity space if I want to find some fights.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of guys that are that are looking for those hunters coming in because they want those fights.
Do you have anything else to talk about in regards to Fraternity, Luke?
Sorry, just repeat that. I broke up.
Do you have anything else that you want to talk about? Topics regarding your alliance, Luke?
No, I don't. I think we're good.
I do actually have one, and I might invite one of the members on later this week. With various members of legacies going their own way or departing brave, I hear Winterco has picked up some of those newer players or players from these different groups, particularly into like Lord of Worlds or some of the other triggers, like literally triggered.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be the case. I mean, is that though because they were in Legacy, or is it because everyone wanted to stay with their alliance for what was over a year war, and they may have thought about leaving 8, 9, 10 months ago, and now the war's ended, so it's a good time to leave without deserting your current allies, I guess or your current alliance, I guess is a good way of putting it. So I think there's definitely going to be part of the churn from Legacy and what's going on in Legacy, but I suspect there's also an element of Corps that would have made the move naturally over the year or so that the war was going on, but didn't want to because their alliance is at war and they don't want to leave.
Well, the way I see it is, you've had these LowSec fights. You're close to Jita. You're in a good position. The grass is greener.
I do have to ask, for those unfamiliar with the area like myself, other than Fraternity, who else lives in the Vale of the Silent, that sort of Garistas area up in that LowSec, Nullsec region?
So you've got in Vale, you've got Fraternity, Sons of Bane, which are a small alliance live down the bottom of Vale. You have DTS, who is a German alliance, and you have Lord of Worlds and Blades of Grass, and then over in Tribute you have Fraternity, as well as literally Triggered and Fraternity University sort of area.
Isn't was it Corlem Syndicate? Don't they have like a little holding out there on the far side of Vale?
That's right. Yes, Corellium Syndicate hold the gas constellation in Vale.
Yeah, haven't flown with them, but just had a few conversations with some of their folks. Seem like a pretty decent bunch.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple of conversations with them. They seem all good guys.
So
Are they
regarding to Zhongland, so we know Test is moving to Zhongland, so you guys will keep blue with them, right? Even after the war.
I think the reality is, if you've got, because of the way Drone Lands is laid out, it's pretty difficult to have a reset with entities in the Drone Lands because everyone's umbrellas just overlap each other. It's both one of the really good things about the Drone Lands, but also one of the realities about bunging all that space into the top corner of NewEden.
How about the politics of the ESS? Because they're moving to the Drone Lands, who claims whose ESS now? Especially us and the former Winterco, the Winterco old Droneland systems.
I mean, as per obviously the announcement that Rich, you translated, the space that Frat holds is still our ESS's.
Ah, very well.
So, if there's nothing else on Fraternity, Rich, you wanted to talk about the Eve meets that have happened recently.
Real quick before we get too far, I'm sorry to break your wonderful transition, but we had some fantastic intel come through the Twitch chat. Twitch user Mazdum2 let us know that the Thucker rig for Citadels in LowSec gives a bonus of 1.9x compared to only 0.1 in high-sec and null-sec. So it's very much a rig that CCP put in the game to give massive benefits if used exclusively in LowSec. Go ahead with the stuff for it.
Wait, 1.9? Okay, that's not a joke. That's pretty good odds. Okay, yesterday I went to Nottingham, an hour drive, maybe a little less depending on if I get a mail for speeding later this week. Hopefully not. And you might notice that one of the regular guests on Sunday is not here today, Sutonia. I did meet him, and I also met Teddy, Ashy, lots of people from the EVNT crew, Rocket X as well, from the EVNT Alliance Tournament crew, Ithaca Hawk, General Stargazer, BRJ, so many people at Nottingham. It was great. Oh, and Dr. Spard and Phantomite. I got a bunch of swag with actually some of it to do with a new initiative that CCP has set up recently called FleetUp. So we've got all the swag with this kind of logo on it. There's a fanny pack somewhere behind the green screen, some shot glasses, which unfortunately I don't drink, and along with some pins attached to my lapel here. And actually gave me one of the pins for Foxholders. So I am an honorary member now.
For the viewers, or rather the listeners on the audio only podcast, the FleetUp swag, number one, you can see more details on it in the forum post by CCP. But just a general description, got a black background with a blue fleet and a white up and a really like Eve-esque text, and it looks really cool. And CCP, can I please buy this on the merch store? Thank you.
There are still other Eve meetup events going on. I believe the Eve NOLA should be still going on until today. There's FinFest, Eve Northeast, Eve Boston coming up, and a few others. But it was a fantastic day to head out to Nottingham. I had a lot of fun there, met all sorts of people. I also was heavily surveilled by a few people from the Eve NT crew because I was expected to dress properly and act well, otherwise I'd be kicked from my new group as part of my trial. So, if people are interested in these Eve meetups, it's a fantastic way to connect with the community, connect with people, and just have a great time.
To give the dates for the Eve meetups, FinFest will be happening the 20th to the 22nd of August. Eve Northeast is the 16th to the 19th of September. Eve Boston is the 18th of September. Eviana is the 2nd of October, and Eve Vegas 2021 is the 22nd through the 24th of October.
Just out of curiosity, is there a web address anywhere that kind of has this list, or is this just kind of we learn it as we go?
There is a web address.
It will be linked in the description and in the show notes for those listening later. But for those in Twitch chat, it's in Twitch chat.
Thanks.
I do wonder, we've been talking about Fraternity a lot. In the wider Eve mind, so to speak, Fraternity is known for having a lot of Chinese players. Are there Chinese Eve meetups as well? Are they related more to what happens on Serenity, or is it just not a thing in the culture of Eve players? Is the country too big? What's the deal over there?
So I know Fraternity definitely run meetups in China, and I think others other parts of the Chinese community are invited to come. I guess Sheng, you might have a bit more of a view as well about the wider community.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of corporations that are from Serenity, since they're big enough, they usually host their own meetups and things like that. So on Serenity, they definitely have a lot of meetups that happened in the past. I don't know about anything that's currently planned, but yeah. I mean, Fraternity is from TQ, and it's kind of mixed. A lot of people, even they are Chinese, but they don't live in China, so it's kind of complicated in that sense. But the people who play on Serenity, they definitely like or most likely they live in China, so it's easier to organize those kind of meetups.
I don't think logistics or like distance should be that great of a decider for the Chinese meetups, especially with their railway networks across the nation. But I understand that they take the virus and lockdown really seriously over there.
Yeah, I mean, COVID is wave after wave, so it's kind of hard to organize something and then next month it's canceled, right? So you have to count for those things and plan ahead.
But in general, Eve meetups are very fun. This year is rough, so if you are planning to go to one of those, be safe. But Eve meetups are some of the most fun times I've had myself, between the couple of Vegases and the Reykjavik meetup that I've been to, as well as smaller gatherings of players. Eve players are generally really cool people, and meeting each other in person. A lot of times you get along with people you don't always get along with in game.
It was also a great opportunity to share stories and meet other Eve, well, not just players, but also people who were involved in FCing, leadership, content generation, and streams. I got to meet Frost. Yeah, that was great. Hopefully I get a photo sent to me soon. My phone has a terrible camera, but other people did take plenty of photos, and I hope to have them up and to show them off soon.
Yeah, I feel like the general vibe is people are usually terrible to each other in game. If you go to a meetup, you should not be terrible to people. Just as a PSA, your in-game persona is different from your out-of-game Eve Meet persona.
I would say that I don't think the normal is that people are terrible. I just think the people who are terrible in game are just really loud.
All right.
Like the other day we were roaming and like a bunch of people recognized us, and all but one of them, everybody was super positive, even the people we fought with. We only had like one person who randomly went off on us. But I find that to be generally the case from all of like the big alliances. Most people are fantastic people in all of them, and it's just the minority are maybe not so fantastic.
Well, for those who are not so fantastic, there was some stories exchanged of various things because of past incidents in the Eve meetups. But for the majority of Eve meetups, it's really pleasant. Everything goes off without a hitch, except later in the night when, because we were outside a pub, some fun things occurred with the other patrons of the nightclubs on a Saturday night. So that was a bit of entertainment before I drove home. But yeah, seeing Eve players in person and say off stream and not just a disembodied voice, it's pretty interesting. I got to meet other small gangers, and well, Geronix is taller than life. But that's all I have to say about the Eve meetup. It was a fantastic time. I had a lot of fun there. I got to talk a lot, listen even more.
All right, so we're going to wrap up with everybody's final thoughts. Luke, as our guest today, would you like to go first? Any final thoughts on anything? Any shout outs?
I shout outs to obviously everyone in Frat. I've got to do that, or they'll collar me later. But I think the big thing you mentioned with the hunting kind of increasing in Vale, I think hopefully we'll see that across the wider game now, and we can get back to a level of just blowing random stuff up continuously.
Shen, you have any shout outs to go out with?
I'm not sure. I think just looking forward to post-war. I think rebuild of economy and the rebuild of the stocks happening right after the war. And since the war is over, I think there'll be a lot more opportunities for people to hunt and to crab as well.
Rich, do you have anything to go out with?
Well, in regards to the Fraternity and the ESS, maybe one day you'll catch Fapsky's Paladin, but not today.
Nick,
I'll make sure people bring more stuff.
From myself, no real shout outs at the end other than a couple of the folks in the chat that I do appreciate, the back and forth and info on me on stuff that I didn't know about. Much appreciated.
Artimus?
Yeah, just a good luck to Brave and all their new allies. I am not a member of Brave directly, but they're a high-sec group, and I'm looking forward to see where the moons move, because that is where I will move to.
All right, then. That has been Hawking and Stations. Thank you for joining us.